Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons and Dragons, and we're going to talk about the real issue that's happening right now in tabletop role-playing games, and why there is so much animosity toward Dungeons and Dragons from the I would say, and actually this is interesting because I think this goes beyond the OGL, beyond the OSR, and beyond the orc to the indies as well. So why is there so much tension around Dungeons and Dragons, and what is actually happening to what was the 2023 manic panic? What was the 2023 manic panic? What was the 2023 OGL crisis actually about? Was it about the OGL? I think there's strong evidence that that's not what the fight was about, and I have new understanding of what the fight actually was about. I want to put it in front of you and let's discuss. All right, so follow me along here. All right, what was the 2023 manic panic? What was the 2023 OGL crisis actually about? All right, and I'm going to posit to you that it had nothing to do with the OGL. Okay, and zero to do with the OGL. It really had nothing to do. So one, I've been married for 30 years, okay? And me and my wife have had fights over those decades, right? And by the way, if you're in a relationship where you guys don't fight, that's not a good relationship. You definitely need to, fights should not, so I'm going to say it, because I've been married for 30 years. I know more about being married than you. Really, okay? I know more about keeping a relationship together than you do. Really, so I'm going to give you a little advice here, okay? So first of all, you should be fighting no less than twice a year, okay? But if you're fighting more than twice a quarter, you got a problem, right? And you should fix it, right? How should you fix it? One, you should be sacrificial toward your, more sacrificial toward your partner, right? That's the first thing you can do. And then if that doesn't fix it, and you truly just sacrifice and, take less and do more, right? That'll fix a lot of things, I'll tell you right now, right? Because a lot of times, if you guys had something in the beginning, right? And if there's anything left of that love, and you start just saying, hey, I'm going to take the hit here, I'm going to do a whole lot more, and I'm not going to expect back anything, I'm just going to sacrifice, that will fix a ton of stuff. It will absolutely fix a ton of stuff, right? And if it doesn't, then go get counseling. Go get marriage counseling, in my humble opinion, right? And the reason why I say that is I know a dude who his wife was like, hey, let's go get marriage counseling. And he was like, nah, we don't need it. They were divorced a year later. Like, that was not wise on his part, right? And the other thing is, if your partner ever says, say, hey, let's do this to fix what we have, you darn well better do it, right? Like, unless it's you darn well better do it, in my humble opinion. Okay. All right. So yeah, if you want to keep things together, right? So one thing I've learned from being married for 30 years is a lot of times when you fight, the fight ain't nothing about, it has nothing to do with what you're actually fighting over. And that's exactly what I think. And so this is me continuing a post-mortem on the 2023 Manic Panic, the 2023 OGL crisis. And by the way, I am 100% aware that y'all's are done with this and nobody wants to talk about this anymore. And this is not helping my views in any way, and I really wish I could move on from this topic, but the reason I'm not is I truly believe this is a absolutely critical, absolutely massively important part of Dungeons and Dragons IRL history. And by the way, there are multiple levels of D&D expertise right now. You can be a Dungeons and Dragons edition expert. You can be, an edition on a specific. You can be an expert on a specific edition. You can be expert on the rules. You can be expert on D&D lore, right? And you can also be an expert on D&D IRL history. And that's what I'm pursuing: expertise on D&D IRL history. And I really think this is a massively important part of D&D IRL history. So let's get into this. What actually happened? All right. So one, I'm having a conversation that, I'm sorry to say, you're not, right? So where am I at in this conversation, right? So I talk about D&D publicly every single day, right? And I get the world coming at me, and I get really deep in the weeds, like super D&D super fans, and I also get D&D casuals, because I do shorts, right? And D&D casuals will roll up and say stuff. I also have a deep in the weeds, right? Response network on Twitter. I respond to things I see on Twitter, and I have discussions with industry insiders, industry adjacents, right? And so all of that, and then also I'm intaking material that's being put onto YouTube. So here's a trend that I am seeing right now. What was the 2023 Manic Panic? What was the 2023 OGL crisis actually about? Okay, it was about niche or mainstream. Dungeons & Dragons is the only tabletop role-playing game in the world that has reached a point where it is about to take tabletop role-playing games mainstream. And if you think I'm joking, I just want you to look at the end of the month we're literally in. There is going to be we're looking at D&D Honor Among Thieves this month, right? Like, if you think I'm wrong, that D&D is trying to take, that Hasbro is trying to take D&D mainstream, you ain't paying attention. They're literally launching an American blockbuster this month, right? And so what really I'm seeing is a trend, and so right now you can go over to Dave Thomavore. He has a brilliant YouTube channel, absolutely brilliant. I've listened to every video he's ever done. He is an incredibly engaged, independent tabletop role-playing game content creator, and he does in-depth, incredibly visually stunning reviews of pretty much every tabletop role-playing game that's ever been created, right? Like, that matters. That's a good way of putting it, right? And he just did a perfect explanation of what the 2023 OGL crisis was actually about, right? What was it actually about? Niche or mainstream. So his latest video is talking about, he's like, is Free League going to be okay? And the reason why is he's saying, I'm worried because Free League could become billionaires. That's the gist of his video. And he's like, you know what? Free League used to be this nice niche little tabletop role-playing game company, but they're picking up licensed product. They are doing 2-3 books a year, and they just announced the Walking Dead universe AMC role-playing game, right? And he's like, that's not a tiny little company doing a cool little tabletop role-playing game. Oh my gosh, this tabletop role-playing game company could make billions. Oh my gosh, this company could actually, oh no. Could normal people start playing tabletop role-playing games? Could muggles get the same advantages of Manifold Sentience? Could they get the same advantages of increased confidence, intelligence, and charisma that we get? Oh my gosh! Is tabletop role-playing games going to become mainstream and not just niche for me and my nerd friends? Right? And I hear it in my comments. I see it on Twitter. And Dave Thomavore has done this beautiful video that's going, I'm worried this niche tabletop role-playing game company might become commercially successful. Capitalism in effect. Oh my gosh, they could succeed and they could be big. They could be billionaires. Oh my goodness. What's happening? This was all supposed to stay niche. Only me and my nerd friends are supposed to benefit from tabletop role-playing games. This company might actually reach the mainstream. We could get Karens among us. Oh no! That's what you're getting. That's the fear. That is what's happening. Go look at my recent tweets, right, on Twitter, and you will find people, and and look in my comments right here. They're all saying the same thing. It's people who are very used to having all the benefits of tabletop role-playing games to themselves and are terrified of a tabletop role-playing game. And they say this with Hasbro, with Wizards of the Coast all the time. They're like, oh, they could make $2 billion a year. They might monetize and actually make the same amount of money as a board game company or a sneaker company or a video game company, and they're supposed to be small. How dare they succeed commercially, right? And there is a frenzy from the indies, the orcs, the OSR, the OGLers of how dare you succeed? How dare you achieve like late capitalist success? We're supposed to be small. This is supposed to be for me and my nerd friends, and how dare you create any kind of platform where a Karen could walk up, where a muggle could walk up and achieve manifold sentience and actually sit at my nerd table, right? And here's where we arrive. It is a complete inversion of the 80s. We have inverted the entire scene. And in the 80s, we were nerds, and we carried our D&D books home, and the jocks came up and slapped the books out of our hands, right? And said, "You silly nerd, you can't achieve manifold sentience. You can't increase your vocabulary. You cannot become more charismatic, confident, and intelligent with these books. I'm going to kick them into the stream." And now, in 2023, we've reached the exact inversion. The nerds coming and knocking the books out and saying, "Don't you dare," saying to Dungeons and Dragons, saying to Hasbro, "Don't you dare hand that player's handbook to that Karen, that Muggle, that jock. Don't you even think about giving this nerd culture treasure to those people." And we have completely inverted the space. And now we arrive. And that's what the 2023 Manic Panic, that's what the 2023 OGL crisis was actually about. The possibility of nerds having to share tabletop role-playing games with muggles, with jocks and Karens and all the regulars. Every word of that is my humble opinion. What's really important is when I get to hear your humble opinion, when you get in the comments and send your traffic. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.